Hi, everyone. Welcome to the pre-show. It is our Security Plus study group today. We'll be starting in about 10 minutes. We've got, I think, things going now. I should probably bring up the chat so I could see folks that are in there. Security Plus study group is live. And let's put the link /live. We'll put that in there. We'll put this on here. Let's really make sure that things are working. Well, you're seeing part of it. Something must be working. Is this working? Yes, it is. Is this working? Yes, it is. And lastly, we should probably put something up on this screen just to make sure it works. How about we put, instead of a picture of that, let's put a picture of this. Instead of just a screensaver, we should probably put something productive, like actually showing a presentation. There we go. So we should be able to also do this. So all of our cameras are working. See, welcome Texas. We will not mess with you. There is presentations good there, presentations good here. Let's see if I can get Pinpoint to work. This has been no. It's just not going to work. There's something gone awry with Pinpoint. I'm going to have to find another cursor program to do stuff with. We'll have to figure that out. Hello, chat room. Welcome. For those of you watching over on the YouTube, you'll notice there's no chat there. The chat is over at professormesser.com/live. That is the chat. That will get you chatting. Kuwait is back. Back again. Welcome. Where you been, Wills? Will S. Been watching videos for 3 years. Your first live session. Opinion on CASP versus SSCP? I don't have one. And it doesn't matter anyway. The only opinion that matters is the hiring managers. That's my opinion. Is find out what people are looking for and go get that. That will be how you determine what is best. Delaware, welcome. Got a lot of folks checking in here. East Coast, Central Coast. The Westers they're getting there. Bahamas are here. Welcome. Good to have you here. There's South Dakota. Arlington, Texas is in the chat room. Michigan, welcome. St. Kitts. What are we getting all of these Caribbean island offshore kind of things happening today? It's that kind of vibe. St. Louis. It's really St. Louis, I know, but I watch too many old movies where they want to meet me in St. Louis. I guess they kind of had to do that to make the song work, didn't they? Did anybody really call it that before the song? Well, these are questions that we'll have to address at some other time. South Carolina is here. Hello, snow. Philly, it's a snow day in Philly? Wow. I didn't even think of the snow that went through this week, but of course. Baton Rouge, welcome. We've got no snow here. There's Cleveland. Welcome, Cleveland. You guys rock. I have weather here that says it is 64 degrees Fahrenheit here at the world headquarters in Tallahassee, Florida of Messer Studios. Trinidad and Tobago, no snow there either. No snow there. As probably expected. That's probably what. Charlotte, welcome. In Costa Rica, got to get down there and learn how to surf. That's on a list of things. Not sure what list it is. I don't know if it's a good list or a bad list, but it's a list nonetheless. We'll have to figure out. It's not a bucket list. I don't like the term bucket list. It's just a list. Maryland. My Maryland. We got I try to throw those odd little things in, Ward. Well, it doesn't matter if they hit or not. They amuse me. And quite honestly, that's all that matters for that. Oh, Colorado is here. See, Colorado being cold, that's what you want in Colorado. You want to go out and ski. You want to go do that. Chicago is checking in to the chat room. Welcome. Got to get things together. I think I've got all the questions ready to go here. We've got this running on the front. We've got Socrative. We're recording here. Cylons are going down here. The link to answer the questions, we'll talk about that in a moment, but it's professormesser.com/QA. You'll find it. You will find it. I'm going to keep going with that. Hello, Nashville. It's another place it's on a list. It's another place on the list with things to be able to do. Visit Nashville and go to the Opry. Go see some history. That kind of thing. I got to pick a good night. I got to pick a night when somebody is there that has some who's very specific. I don't want to go when the big name is there necessarily. I want to find that person who's going to be the big name. Watch them. We'll get there with that. It's just live music in general, I think is good. To be able to catch some of that. We got 4 minutes left. I should probably keep an eye on the clock. 3 minutes and 30 seconds, really. There's a Dukes of Hazzard museum. Hold on. Wait a second. Hold your horses. A Dukes of Hazzard museum. Oh, this might be a thing. Mrs. Professor Messer does not know about this. And this is going to happen now. Before it was okay. It was just, live music and enjoying yourself and having a beer. And now it's the Dukes of Hazzard Museum. This whole thing has changed. This whole thing has gone completely south. Oh, won't she be sorry? Oh, we have less than 3 minutes left. We'll get this thing started. Hello, Vegas. Thanks for checking in. Probably no snow out there either. Out in Vegas. I haven't kept up with the weather in Vegas. See what's going on. We've got plenty of questions today for Security Plus. I've got hello Europe. That's you have a very big house. You're just Europe. Europe is there. Romania is there. Marius is in Europe. Is it Marius or Marius? That's what we'll deal with today. It's a big place, the Europe. Getting smaller all the time, it seems. We're not sure. We're trying to figure all of that out, aren't we? 2 minutes to go. Should probably get a sip, a hot beverage. Oh, the next logical step after Security Plus is whatever logically you're trying to do. Some people are focusing on firewalls. Some people are focusing on penetration testing. Some people are focusing on just security in general. So that's really what you have to worry about. What is the buzzing sound, TJ? I think there's issues there if you've got a buzzing sound. Might want to check on things. I don't hear any buzzing sounds here. It'd be nice to kind of check. Maybe we could check the live stream ourselves. Maybe I could check in with that and listen to it and make sure. A little quality assurance wouldn't be a bad idea, right? We can listen in to the live and we'll hear it. See, that's pretty good. That's a very short. See, that's pretty good. Wow. That is really impressive how fast they're able to do that streaming now. There used to be big delays in the stream, and there's no big delays anymore. It's remarkable. You're hearing me as soon as I say it. So that's pretty challenging. We got half a minute to go. We'll get there. Where will you leave your answers for the question? Don't worry. I will explain everything, exactly what you need to know. You will have all of this information there. It's also at professormesser.com/live. There's a link on that page as well that explains how to get to the Q&A site with all of those things. So, but now it's time, everybody. It's time to get things going. Let's see. And I'll talk about advice and those things in the second hour. We'll bring up all the phone lines. I'll answer some questions from the chat room. We'll figure out what's next after Security Plus and also much more. Here we go with the study group. Hello, everyone. Welcome to February of 2019's Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group, coming to you live from the world headquarters of Messer Studios here in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer. I will be your host for this first hour of Security Plus related questions and answers. We're doing this all live. You can participate if you are watching this live and answer interactively. And then in the second hour, I open up the phone lines. We're already getting questions from the chat room to talk about, if you've already gotten Security Plus, what do you do next? I'll talk all about those things as long as someone reminds me, because I will not remember an hour from now, because that's how things work in my little brain. But fortunately, we've got this hour where I do know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Security Plus, the latest version of Security Plus. I'm able to do these live study groups, by the way, and answer your questions because you're supporting the website. Every minute of every video that I create is available for you to watch online for free. No registration, no paywall. I don't want your email address. I don't care. I don't want to track any of those things. I just want you to be able to have access to the content without having any barriers in your way. There are some people that would like a version of the same content of all of these training courses, so something they could take offline. And I have those available as well. You can find those at professormesser.com/getsecplus, and you will find video options you can purchase. You can find audio-only options that you could put on your mobile device and listen while you're driving in your car. My course notes, both in physical and in a digital version, are available there. So you have a lot of options that you've got available to see. If you are watching this live on the YouTube, you may want to come over to professormesser.com/live. I am watching the live stream right there. Folks are saying, hey, can he see this? Yes, that is the live stream that I can see. Dan M., who asked that. So there's nothing more straightforward than that. This live stream, by the way, is one that I'll just be referencing for this entire hour. And if you want to ask a question directly in the second hour, it's open phone lines. We can talk about the Security Plus. We can talk about the industry in general. We can talk about the next release on Xbox. I don't care. We'll talk about anything. It's an open phone line. Also, you may want to keep track of what's going on here. You can, of course, go to professormesser.com/Twitter and find out more. Follow me on Twitter. And, of course, all the new videos are added to YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. Just make sure that you, of course, are following everything that's there as well. There's plenty to see, plenty that's there. And I also have a podcast version of these study groups available. If you want an audio-only version of this, you'd like it to be automatically downloaded into your podcasting program, you can simply go to professormesser.com/podcast, and you will find my A+, my Network Plus, my Security Plus study groups, all in a podcast format. That will automatically download them. I usually have those downloads available usually the same day, sometimes the following day, depending on what's going on in my world. But I try to get them out in a couple of days so that you have access to those, and they'll automatically be downloaded. And that way, when you hop in the car in the morning, the podcast is there waiting for you. Some of those of you that have come back to these videos a day or so later after we create them may also find that there is an extensive time-stamped record of exactly what we did during these study groups. We work hard to put these together. And my marketing manager, Lori, has to listen to me go through all of this. Hi, Lori. So she is listening after the fact, making timestamps, putting all of these things in. So if you wanted to jump right to a phone call, if there's a particular question you wanted to go to, you can jump through all of these videos very, very, very quickly. My goal is to make this all so easy for you to get access to. It's no good unless you have access to all of this material. Let's talk about the Security Plus certification. Today, we're going to talk about the current version of Security Plus. And if you see this written somewhere, it's called an SY0501. That is the term that CompTIA uses to define this particular exam version. This is an exam that was released on October the 4th, 2017. It's been out for just over a year now. It's a single exam, 90 minutes long. You can get a maximum of 90 questions. You often get a little fewer than that, but they could ask you 90 full questions. It's a passing score of 750 on a range between 100 and 900. So there's a lot of different weirdness going on with how they grade this. We're not exactly sure how they grade it. It's not a percentage. They make it difficult, I think, on purpose. I think there's some good reasons they do that, I guess. We just don't know what those good reasons are. The exam itself is mostly multiple choice. There are also what we call performance-based questions on the exam. Some people who go into the exam don't realize this. The first handful of questions you're going to get are not going to be the traditional pick A, B, C, or D questions. They might be a matching question. It might be fill in the blank. They might be putting you, well, Security Plus, they probably won't be putting you at a command prompt because there aren't any of those types of exam objectives on the Security Plus, but they could be asking you to put things in order from highest to lowest, fastest to slowest. We're not really sure exactly what they might ask, but it will all come from those exam objectives. Make sure you're aware of them. Today, we're going to do Q&A. Today, most of what we're doing is multiple choice. I do have a performance-based question for you, very first thing. We're going to try to emulate what goes on an actual exam. If you want to participate, if you are watching this live on a Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Time on February the 20th of 2019, then you can, of course, answer these questions along with everyone else by popping open a new browser window. Go to professormesser.com/QA. QA. Not sure what that stands for. There's also an app that you can install on your mobile device. You're looking for an app called the Socrative Student app. This is something we should probably have available as soon as you can. Download that. It will ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word. Make sure you spell it right, PROFESSORMESSER. And if you've done all of those things and you've typed it in, you've popped open a new window, a question is waiting for you. This is actually a question from last month. So that's why we call this our rewind question to see if you are indeed in the right place. And the question asks, which of the following would be the best way to segment two IP subnets that are physically located on the same switch? Which of the following, I'll give you a list. We'll look at it in a moment. Which of the following would be the best way to segment two IP subnets that are physically located on the same switch? And I have some options. Would it be air gaps? Would it be VLANs? Would it be OS virtualization? Would it be static routing? Or would it be firewall policies? One of those is going to be the right answer. For this particular one, since it's the one from last month, I'm showing you the answers as they're coming in. Normally, you don't see that part. But you can see from the answers that have come in already from 156 of you, 88% of you have said VLANs. That's a nice big number. Now, when we go through these during the actual study group, please don't put any hints in the chat room. Don't put your answers in the chat room. You will always want to go back to professormesser.com/QA to be able to answer these. That way, we're all trying to figure it out on our own, and we'll figure out certainly the answer when we get back to those. So those of you that did answer VLANs, obviously the correct answer, 88% of you did say VLANs. 6% of you said air gaps, 3% said static routing, 2% said firewall policies, 1% said OS virtualization, not even remotely close to the actual answer, which indeed was VLANs. That's what we do whenever we're trying to plug in these devices. VLANs have the same concept, the same idea as having two separate physical local area networks. But instead of having two separate physical devices, like a red device and a blue device, why don't we put them into the same device? We'll squish them together. But it's still separated. Even though they're on the same physical device, we have virtually created separate local area networks so that we have VLANs, virtual LANs. And that's one way that we're able to minimize the amount of devices that we have to maintain and manage or purchase to begin with. These switches aren't exactly inexpensive. And it's a very easy way to segment things out. Customer A does not see anything that customer B is doing and vice versa. One of the nice advantages of having that. And so those of you that did answer, that 89%, you were spot on with this. So well done. I think a lot of us now, you can see you're in there, you're answering the questions. It's now time to get some brand new questions. And so I've got a number of new questions here. We're going to do some multiple choice today, but the first question I like to give you is a performance-based question. This is very similar to the type of question you may be asked at the very beginning of the exam. Now, some of you that have been to my study groups before, you know that my strategy is generally to, at the very beginning of the exam, I am under a lot of stress. I don't take exams very well. I'm not that person. I don't go in very casually. I have a lot of adrenaline going. There's a lot of anxiety. I sit down. It's hard to read. I mean, I'm reading. I can read. I'm able to read, but I'm not interpreting what I'm reading. I'm not understanding what I'm reading just because things are so nervous at the moment. So I generally will skip over performance-based questions. CompTIA allows you to do this. They allow you to skip to any question at any time on the exam. And only when you submit the exam is it actually graded. So I can jump over the performance-based questions, do all the multiple choice, and then come back. You just have to be very careful with your time management. But for us today, we're not going to do that. We're going to jump right into a performance-based question. And this question is one where we have to configure a firewall. This is a firewall configuration question that says, let me change it on your screen so you can see the picture that I have available to you that says configure 2 firewall rules that would allow LDAP from the video server to the database server and block all other traffic from the video server. So this is a question that's very specific. It's asking for very specific rules. And it's asking for 2 very specific rules. We'll show you the picture in a moment so that you can really reference this. We want to configure 2 firewall rules that would allow LDAP from the video server to the database server and block all other traffic from the video server. So those of you that are listening on the podcast, you may find that this one is not going to really help you very much. This is all sort of a visual display. So here is, let me get rid of my head here so you can actually see what this looks like. There it is. So here are the rules that we want to create. Rule number 1 and rule number 2. For both of those rules, we want to be able to provide a source IP, a destination IP, the protocol, whether it's TCP or UDP. We want to put a port number, and we're going to specify that we're going to either allow it or block it. So we must not be using a next generation firewall here, because a next generation firewall would simply allow you to put the application name in. No, this one is much more old school. We're going to focus on putting in the exact source, destination, protocol, port, and then allow or block. So let me give you the rule again. Now that you're looking at the web server, the video server, the file server, the database server, the management server, and the storage server with the firewall in the middle that has fire on it, as if that wasn't clear for everyone, here are your rules again. Configure 2 firewall rules, one that would allow LDAP from the video server to the database server, and one that will block all other traffic from the video server. So I sort of gave you kind of a hint there where those 2 specific rules would go. That might help you as you're going through these. So maybe that would help figure out what goes in what rule and what goes in the other. These firewall rules are something you absolutely need to know for the exam. This is really the challenge that you have when building out these exam pieces, is that everything that you're going to run into all goes back to the Security Plus exam objectives. But the exam objectives, they do tell you need to understand how to create firewall rules. You need to understand that process. In fact, you need to be able to read firewall rules as well, the firewall logs. But you should certainly be able to do this. One advantage, and people in the chat room are saying, well, which firewall? There's so many different firewalls out there that you could use. Fortunately, speaking as someone who worked as a senior systems engineer for a next generation firewall company, once you understand basic firewall rules, they apply across the board to practically every firewall that's out there. And the firewall rules you're looking at here are pretty straightforward. They're giving you a pretty straightforward breakdown. This is the most basic of firewall rules that you would run into. So as you're looking at this again, let me quickly give you those rules again. You want to configure 2 firewall rules that will allow LDAP from the video server to the database server and block all other traffic from the video server. There are folks in the chat room saying, I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never configured a firewall before. I don't know what this LDAP thing is you're talking about. And that's where we're going to break this down. I'm going to give you a step-by-step breakdown of how you would figure out the answer to this, how you would break down all of these different things. So I'm taking this information, by the way, because some of you are saying, I never got this in a class. I never saw this. But all of this is really specifically written in the Security Plus exam objectives. This is a type, well, I guess some hints are being put into the chat room, but this is a type of process, of logical thinking process that is going to help you as you go through these. And I added a little twist to the rules as well. So make sure that you're very familiar with these things. If you think you know the answer, you want to go to professormesser.com/QA. You want to be able to put that information in. Please no hints in the chat room. Don't put answers in the chat room. Don't do any of those types of things. You want to make sure that you're very familiar with the idea of what this is. So no hints, please, because at some point I'll just have to start, unfortunately, restricting access. We don't want to do that. Let's have a look now at what we would break this down as. So first, let's break down. I am still here. You just can't see me up there, but I'm covering myself up because we want to look at these IP addresses here. So let's break down what all of these things are that are listed. So when we have a look at these, we know what we're talking about. So we have a list of IP addresses on the left that are in a DMZ. We have a list of IP addresses on the right that are an internal network. So one of the things that we want to do is to really be able to understand these IP addresses first that we're talking about. We talked about two devices in this list. These two devices, one is the video server and one is the database server. So the two IP addresses we want to look at, we know the video server is 10.1.1.7 and our database server is 10.2.1.20. The other thing this asks is that we need to allow LDAP but block everything else. So there's a challenge there, is that we have this need to be able to understand what LDAP is. So you have to be able to know port numbers. And although specific port numbers are not listed in the Security Plus exam objectives, there are specific protocols listed in the Security Plus exam objectives. And we're going to talk in a moment about why these two rules are useful and how you could get away with only writing one rule. But that was not the question. The question asked you to write two rules, and it gave you very specific rules that it was looking for. So our first question, the first rule that we wanted, was one that would allow LDAP from the video server to the database server. Our video server is 10.1.1.7. So our source IP address is going to be 10.1.1.7. We know that we want to allow the video server to talk to the database server. The database server is 10.2.1.20, so our destination IP address we'll put down as 10.2.1.20. So station 1 talking to station 2. This is a very common source destination that you would see in any particular firewall. This is a very common type of firewall rule. Now let's shift gears to the type of traffic we want to allow. We need to specify the port number for LDAP. LDAP is TCP port 389. So we're going to allow, we'll put in specifically, we want to allow the TCP protocol running port 389, and we're going to allow that traffic. So that rule itself would allow traffic through the firewall. And as I mentioned in my Security Plus my Security Plus videos, firewalls, generally every firewall that's on the market these days, all have an implicit deny associated with them. So if you put no rules in the firewall at all traffic would be blocked. So one of the things you'll see here, by adding this rule, finally, some traffic can go through the firewall. And the only traffic that would currently go through this firewall is 10.1.1.7 to 10.2.1.20 TCP over port 389, and it would be allowed. So there's our first rule. That was the first big rule. So that meant that you had to know what LDAP was. You need to understand what protocol LDAP is using, and then you need to figure out what IP addresses are from that list, the map that's up on the screen, so you can put those together. Now at this point, only that traffic would be allowed. The question itself said that we want to block all other traffic from the video server. Well, with the implicit deny, which always happens at the bottom of the rule base, everything other than what's listed here will automatically be blocked. But this particular question wanted 2 firewall rules, which meant you had to specifically put in a block rule for that particular server. This block all other traffic from the video server. We know that the video server is 10.1.1.7, so the source IP would be 10.1.1.7. The destination IP would be any. The protocol would be any. The port number would be any, and we would block that traffic. That is a very common rule to put in the firewall as well. So the question you may ask then, well, if there's already an implicit deny, why don't you put nothing down? Why do you have to put an extra rule in there that specifically, that is explicitly denying traffic from the video server? And there might be some good reasons for that, because one of the things that whenever you start looking through these specific types of protocols and ports and firewalls and those types of things is that if you don't have a rule, it generally is not logged. So anything that hits an implicit deny generally would not go into a set of logs. But if you're someone who really likes to keep track of logs that are there, then you absolutely want to go into this list and be able to track those logs as well and know everything that's listed there. So make sure you're very familiar with this process of firewalls and how they work and what they're doing. I think that will also help you if you get into specifics of having to interpret firewall logs. All of your logs are really being built from these particular pieces. So that helps you as well. So whenever you start getting into the details of breaking down what these rules happen to be, just take it a step at a time. Break them down into individual pieces. Try to get a feeling for what they're looking for, and you'll absolutely know what they're doing. As some people are mentioning in the chat room, the order of these logs is also very important. You can't put your deny at the top, because if your deny is at the top, then everything else after that point is denied. So this order is very specific. Whenever you work through all of these, you want to be sure that you're really following the right logs for these. Now, some people are mentioning or asking, hey, isn't LDAP UDP? It's not. LDAP is almost always running. In fact, LDAP is one of these protocols that people say you could run over UDP. It's never run over UDP. You will never see any documentation of LDAP running over UDP. LDAP will always run over TCP. LDAP is not a UDP protocol for a lot of good reasons for that. So make sure you're familiar with those protocols and what is TCP and not UDP and that type of thing. LDAP's almost always. Not almost always. I've only been working with firewalls professionally in some of the biggest networks in the world for double-digit years. So don't ever make that mistake of having the wrong port in there. It's always runs over TCP. You may, after saying that, with networking, you're always going to see a corner case. There will always be somebody who is running something a little weird. That is something that's also 100% true. So that's one you have to think about when you're walking into a network. Let's really have a look at these protocols, and suddenly you'll see somebody who configured an odd set of protocols for LDAP, and it's running over UDP because some manufacturer allows you to configure it that way. Who knows what you'll run into. So folks in the chat room are mentioning, since we're talking about firewalls, so it is a stateless firewall and a stateful firewall. Are there different sets of rules you would put in here? If it was stateless, wouldn't you need to put another rule in here that would allow the response back once it's been sent out? Well, you would, but stateless firewalls effectively don't exist. There is no such thing out there these days as a stateless firewall. All firewalls that you will ever see, ever, of every kind, are stateful firewalls. Those are the only kind you can really trust to also be very secure. So there will never be someone asking you to configure a stateless firewall, because there is no such a thing. to be able to do that. The only thing associated, people are saying, yeah, but stateless is in the exam objectives. Yes, you have to know the difference between a stateful and a stateless firewall, as I have in my videos, but there will never be anything that you'll be asked to do something that's functional with a stateless firewall, because those things don't exist. So that's why that's there. The reason that's in there, and people say this, well, why is that in the exam objectives? Because knowing the difference between stateless and stateful is very important when you're working on a stateful firewall and you put a rule in now, like this one, and you're thinking, ooh, do I need a rule that allows the traffic back the other direction? Oh, no, of course I don't, because this is a stateful firewall, not a stateless firewall. That's the reason you have to know those things, because there is there's a concept. The conceptualizing of the difference is a very important thing when you're doing actual configurations of the firewall itself. So that's why we have to do this. People are also asking, before we get off this question and into something new, and being able to do this, is that if we don't put in the second rule, it still blocks all the traffic. Does that meet my question? It does not, because the question said that you need to configure 2 firewall rules, and I gave you those responses. Also, folks in the chat room that said, what about IP tables? Is IP table stateful? Yes, it is. So you've got, that's why I say you're not going to run into a firewall that's not stateful these days. That's one of the nice things about firewalls these days. You don't even have to worry about creating the response. Can you imagine our firewall rule bases? They'd be twice as big. What a bunch of nonsense to have to go through as an administrator. So thankfully, you will never run into a stateless firewall. Well, we've taken firewalls and we've pushed them down further and further into our list of things. People are also talking about ACLs, which are not firewalls. So ACLs are a little bit different, or at least router switch access control lists are very different than an access control list on a firewall, which are also very different than an access control list on a server, for example. So there's a very different place to go there and deal with that. So let's go through, let's leave firewalls in the dust now. I think we can always come back to this. If you do have more questions about firewalls, more than happy to talk about them, more than happy to talk about next generation firewalls and all the things that are different. We can do that in the after show and go through the detailed stories of putting in next generation firewalls onto today's modern networks. I have plenty of stories, trust me. But now let's do another question. I've got one for you. Here, this one, fortunately, we're getting away from performance-based. This is a multiple choice question, as long as I put it up on my screen. So I will have it in both places. The question asks that a company would like to build their own inventory management system, but they would prefer using a predefined set of application modules. Which cloud deployment model would facilitate the software development strategy? Did I put enough $5 words in here? A company would like to build their own inventory management system, but they would prefer using a predefined set of application modules. Which cloud deployment model would facilitate this software development strategy? And we have some choices, thankfully. A, B, C, D, and E. Is it IaaS? Is it SaaS? Is it a hybrid? Is it PaaS? Or is it community? Yes, I'm talking a little bit out of turn with some of these. If you think you know the answer between all of these, you can, of course, go to professormesser.com/QA and answer the question in real time if you are watching this live, of course. If you're watching this on the replay, you can still pick one and you can see how you did. You just won't be able to count it up with everyone else. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answering in the chat room with what you think it might be. And no hints either in the chat room. That's not what we want to do with those. So make sure you go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer what you think it happens to be. This is one that also is a pretty common thing to run into. So just as firewalls are pretty common, and knowing firewall rules, this is perhaps, I don't know, more common? Is that possible? I think it might be more common than knowing this. So make sure that you go through this and understand the details of what the differences are between really all 5 of these things. All 5 of these things are real cloud-based deployment models. So you need to absolutely know whether it's IaaS, SaaS, is it hybrid, is it PaaS, or is it community? Those are what you need to work through. We've had a number of people answer. Let's see how we did with this particular question. Oh, we're a little torn. We did not hit 50% on this one. In fact, we've got kind of a mix. We have 43% of you that said software as a service. That's what SaaS happens to be. 36% of you said PaaS, which is platform as a service. We also have hybrid. 6% of you said hybrid, which is kind of a mix between a public and a private cloud. And 14% of you said infrastructure as a service, or IaaS. So we've got kind of a mix. 0% of you, by the way, said community, which is also a valid cloud deployment model. So you've got different options here to choose from, but if we had to go with the top two, probably those are the ones we're trying to figure out the difference. The software as a service and the platform as a service. And this all goes back to very key words that are in the question itself. Company would like to build their own inventory management system. Right now, they would prefer using a predefined set of application modules. They are not saying that they need to be able to use a predefined, already built application. They still want to build their own inventory management system. So they're not looking for something that's already pre-built. They need to customize this. They want to be able to create their own style and their own flow, their own work process that's specific to them. So this is one where you need to think about how could somebody facilitate that type of development process. So that's one where now we look at the different models of cloud distribution, and the one we're going to focus on here is platform as a service. And we'll, of course, try to compare that across to what other people answer, which was software as a service. So platform as a service is one where, just like software as a service, you don't own the servers, you don't own the software, you don't have to maintain it, so you don't have a maintenance team. It's not in your data center necessarily, so you may not even have the HVAC to be able to keep everything cool or hot or maintained that way. Somebody else is really handling the platform itself. You're the person who will put together the building blocks of the application. Usually the people that are providing this platform as a service have set up all of these building blocks for you. So they'll give you a building block of a login. They'll give you a building block of an inventory screen. They'll give you the building block of the adding things to the inventory, removing things from the inventory. And they'll give you all of these pieces that you can simply, on their front end, sometimes graphically just click together. Just put them together one after the other. And you could say, if somebody clicks on this, take them to this screen, kind of thing. But you don't have to build or develop the software underneath the surface that's actually adding things to the database. In fact, in some cases, you don't have to know anything about databases. You don't have to know anything about SQL calls. You don't have to know anything about tables locking or any of those types of things. All you have to do is be able to put the blocks together in a way that's customized for your particular workflow. And so platform as a service works great in that scenario. A good example of a company that has really made their name on platform as a service is Salesforce.com. Salesforce.com does have a software as a service offering. Software as a service is something that's already built. You don't really get to customize it. If you're using Google Mail, Google Mail's already built. You're not putting together blocks of, I want the inbox over here, I want my address book over here, I would like to have this so that it performs a particular function if you click on those things. Salesforce also has software as a service where they have a Salesforce, a sales management system that allows them to keep customer names. They allow you to track when you're calling those customers, when you're talking to those customers. Very common to see. And there's lots of companies that have that offering, but there's no customization associated with this. You can't change it. It is locked in stone, and you will go through that particular application in whatever way the developer wants you to go through it, and that's it. But the way that Salesforce has really made their name is they created this platform and realized, wow, we could really take all of these modules we built and hand them over to you. Build up your own front end of whatever you would like it to be. Maybe it's an inventory management system, which has the same type of building blocks as a customer resource management system. So this is really where platform as a service can be very powerful, and you can really customize it without really having a huge knowledge of development, and certainly not building the application from scratch with all of that source code and working through those either. So that's one where whenever you're working through the different models of cloud-based systems, that's an important one to keep in mind. So here's the correct answer then. Platform as a service, 36% of us. We didn't quite get to the 50% that I like to see, but we got pretty close. 44% of you said software as a service, but of course we were building our own system and we had these application modules. That should have been your clue that we have a platform that we need to build out from this. So that's one that you have to think about whenever you're working through it. And would not be infrastructure as a service. Infrastructure as a service is one where we're providing you just with the hardware. Here's a server. It may or may not even have an operating system on it. Here's a piece of hardware in the cloud. You can load on it whatever you would like. That's really from the ground up. You really would have to build all your software out to run on infrastructure as a service, which did not apply for this. A hybrid is one, as I mentioned earlier, is one where if you have a little bit of your cloud that is a private cloud that's only on your internal network, and you have a little bit of a cloud that's on the public side on Azure, Amazon Web Services, Rackspace, whatever it happens to be, you can combine those two things together and have a little bit in each place. That's a hybrid cloud. A community cloud is one where there's a big cloud. Instead of having it as a private cloud, maybe everybody pitches in and builds their own cloud out, but it's owned and controlled by many different entities. That is a community type of cloud. So as we start looking at understanding these differences, this will come up, of course, in Security Plus, and especially given the amount of applications and work that is done today in the cloud. So make sure you step through those. So whenever you see anything talking about building your own app using a predefined set of application modules, you should automatically be thinking about something very modular like platform as a service. So that may help you as you try to figure out these types of questions and what will be associated with those. If this question said, this company is looking to use an inventory management system that has already been created from scratch, that's already built, they don't have to program anything, there's no customization involved, what would this be? That would be software as a service, because there's no customization or control of any aspect of this, especially from a modular perspective. So you should be able to differentiate between platform, software, and infrastructure as a service, especially for your Security Plus exam. Well done with this one. Let's go to another question. Since I've been talking so much, we need to get more questions done. This one, let's shift gears a bit back to operating systems. And this one asks, which of these access control models is most associated with Windows groups? This is a very straightforward question. So this one is really more of a definition type of question. This is really not specifically the kind of question you might get on your exam. This one's a little more straightforward, which I thought we needed after going through that last question. Let's give you a straightforward definition type of question, which asks, which of these access control models is most associated with Windows groups? And our options are role-based access control, mandatory access control, file system security, rule-based access control, and attribute-based access control. So make sure that you know all of these differences. Most of these controls, by the way, are spot on right out of the exam objectives. So make sure as you go through these, you know what it is. This is one whenever you start breaking through these different access control models, there must be, in fact, there's more than this even listed in the Security Plus exam objectives. So you really do have to know these differences of these different access control models. I did not even put all of them down, but all of these are legitimate access control systems when you're working through them. So if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answering the chat room, no hints in the chat room. We want to go through these and figure them out as we go. Which of these access control models is most associated with Windows groups? Your options are role-based access control, mandatory access control, file system security, rule-based access control, and attribute-based access control. All of these are things we need to know. Let's see how we did. with this. Folks in the chat room thinking, I need to go back and watch these again. Yes, you definitely need to know the differences between these as we go. This is something that was not, it was in the the previous version of Security Plus, and then they added more to it in the SY0501. 57% of you said that it's role-based access control. 14% of you said rule-based access control, almost a tie. 13% said file system security. You've also got 9% that said attribute-based access control and 8% that said mandatory access control. So your real key here was a very specific reference to Windows groups. Which of these access control models is most associated with Windows groups? So this may take you back to your A+ exam. If you've ever worked with Windows as a system administrator, this might take you back to those pieces. And as someone who deals in security, you absolutely need to understand how do these different operating systems affect the security and what's happening with these systems. So make sure you're familiar, for instance, with Windows groups. You want to know what those are as you go through this. When you start looking at Windows groups, if you've ever had to do it before, you take there's a bunch of people, obviously, that are logging into Windows. You have all these people's usernames. And then you have the list of things those users are able to do. And we tend to put these people into different groups. For instance, if you're in the accounting department, then you need to be able to be, and you're listed there, you can be put under the accounting department group because that group is given a certain set of rights and permissions. You can assign now access to a directory on a Windows server and say, if you're in the accounting group, you have access to this directory. Anybody who's not in the accounting group does not have access to this directory. That makes it very easy to manage, of course, because now you don't have to put in every individual's name in a big list to have access to those. It's more of access based on your role in the organization, which is why we call this role-based access control. Role-based access control is one where you're going to define this. It may not even be a group. It may not even be accounting. It may be a group that says project managers. Everybody who's a project manager is in a particular group, whether they're in the accounting department, shipping and receiving, manufacturing. If you're a project manager, you're in the project manager group. You can now have access to the project manager software. So that's another good example of a role-based access control. There's a lot of different ways you can set up these groups. In Windows, it's a Windows group. And that's how you get the role-based access control. And I'll give you a couple examples here. So if you're in shipping and receiving, you can use the shipping software. If you're in the accounting department, you're not shipping anything, so you don't have access to the shipping software. If you're the manager inside of shipping and receiving, you might even have additional access for this. There may be many managers within this particular environment in shipping and receiving. All those managers in shipping and receiving can also view the logs. Maybe look at how much money you're spending on your shipping. Those are things, if you're the person who's boxing things up and putting tape on it, just trying to get it out the door, maybe cost isn't your biggest concern. It's about time for you. It's about getting these boxes out. But if you're the managers, you're very interested in how much money these types of things are happening. So people are saying, hey, you use these examples in your videos. Well, yes, that's where this came from. This came from my videos. In fact, specifically, you'll notice at the end of every single one of these when I'm explaining it, right at the bottom, I put this comes from the SY0501 section 4.3 and the video that's called access control models. So if you wanted to get a little more knowledge on these different access control models, that is the exact section of the exam objectives, the exact section of my videos, and the exact name of the video that you want to go to learn a little bit more about these access control models, because there are a lot of them. Oh, there's so many access control models, and it almost becomes overwhelming. Now, fortunately, you've got a few things that you can use to help you along the way. Of course, I always recommend that you go through and really figure out all of the details of everything in these videos and maybe even take your own notes. The problem is that these notes have so much, these videos themselves have so much content, you may not even be able to go through all the videos. I've taken all of the video content, all of the text in the videos, all of the graphs, all of the graphics, all of the images that are important for those videos, and I put them into a single document. These are my Security Plus course notes. You will find that they are very big. They get bigger and bigger all the time. This current version, 94 pages, and they include everything. The cloud computing, it's in there. Talking about all of the access control models, they're in there. All of those weird protocols we were talking about, they're in there. So you'll find all of those details, and you'll find them in professormesser.com/securitycn. Here's the digital version of these course notes. They are big with the number of pages. All the cryptography is in here, everything. Security Plus is so extensive, and it's broken out by video. So all of this is in here and really breaks down. There's a nice image of DNS amplification, which I did over a few slides in my videos while I collapsed it all into one image so you can really see how DNS amplification works. All of this is available right there on my website. You can download it immediately. And I think the price is right. For $20, you get these 94 pages. This doesn't replace you watching the videos. It doesn't replace you reading a good book. It doesn't replace you doing Q&A. It doesn't replace you getting good hands-on. But if you need one place to go to really summarize everything that you've watched in these videos, this is the way you do it. Some of you have also wanted a physical version. Mrs. Professor Messer said I should create one that's a physical version. There's nothing new in here. It's exactly the same as the digital version. For example, the DNS amplification here is exactly the same as the DNS amplification you just saw. There it is, all blurry and out of focus. But it's in a physical version that you can take with you as a book. And if you buy the book version, which does cost a little more because it has to be printed in full color on this heavy stock paper, I'll give you the digital version for free. So you get both of them. If you get the physical version, why not have that digital version available for free as well? If you want to know more about that, you go to professormesser.com/securitycn. Let's get through some more questions. Got more of this here. By the way, every dollar of this goes back to keeping this craziness going on this side of the screen. All my videos are free, so something has to keep the lights on, and it's your support. So thank you for those of you that have purchased these course notes. Thank you so much. It really does go a long way to keeping all of this going. Thanks for all of your support. Let's get more questions done. Here's a question that asks, which of these best describes the Windows archive attribute? Which of these best describes the Windows archive attribute? We're kind of stuck on Windows right now. So here's the 5 different things I've listed here. See if one of these you might recognize as describing the Windows archive attribute. Is it a system administrator defines the attribute for all files and folders to restore? Is it that users set the attribute when they create a new version of a file? Is it that a snapshot is created each time the attribute is set? Is it that the attribute is set when a file is modified? Or is it that any files with the attribute will have a secondary backup? So the archive attribute, which one of these best describes the archive attribute? I'll run through all 5 of these again for the people that are listening on the podcast. A system administrator defines the attribute for all files and folders to restore. Or is it B, users set the attribute when they create a new version of a file? Is it C, a snapshot is created each time the attribute is set? Is it answer D, which is the attribute is set when a file is modified? Or is it answer E, any files with the attribute will have a secondary backup? Got a few options there to know what this is, this attribute, this archive attribute. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. If you don't know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and take a guess. And by the way, that's exactly what you should be doing on your exam. Never leave an answer blank on your exam. If you're submitting the exam, you're done, and you just didn't know the answer to one, take a guess. From what we have been able to tell, although CompTIA does not share the information about grading, from what we have been able to tell, CompTIA does not deduct points if you get one wrong. So there's no penalty for guessing, effectively. So make sure you guess, because you might get it right. On the actual exam, there's usually only 4 options to choose from. So you got a 25% chance of getting it right. So if you don't know the answer, mark A. If you don't know the answer, randomize, or take a guess at what you think it could possibly be. There may be a few you might be able to dismiss immediately, and it's down to 2 or 3. So that's another thing you can do, is go with 2 or 3 of those and figure that out. So some of you are watching, you're talking about those course notes. Those were the SY0501 course notes. And you're saying, well, can I use an older version? Someone here also in the chat room has the older version of the Network Plus course notes. Well, the CompTIA changes their exam objectives between versions. And if you're using older versions of study materials, there will be content on the new exam that you will not have access to that will absolutely affect your final score. So books are relatively inexpensive. Make sure you are using books that match the version of the exam that you're going to take. Otherwise, there's no way that you would be able to score the best possible score for what you know. So that's an important thing to consider. Let's have a look at how you answered this particular question. And again, we're a little torn. It's kind of almost like a three-way split. 34% of you said a system administrator defines the attribute for all files and folders to restore. 30% of you said the attribute is set when a file is modified. 20% said any files with the attribute will have a secondary backup. And then it's a tie for fourth with 8% apiece said users set the attribute when they create a new version of a file, and a snapshot is created each time the attribute is set. So there's where we have to figure out what these differences are. This attribute is used for file backups, and it is used when a file is modified. So this is how the backup, especially one that is an incremental backup, this is how it determines what files have changed since the last time I did a backup. When your backup goes through, it clears out all the attribute bits. So as soon as your backup is done, as soon as it backs up a file, it clears out that bit. So if it comes back the next day and says, well, I need to back up everything that's been changed, it skips everything that doesn't have the attribute set, that archive set, which is telling your file system and telling this backup, you need to archive this. You need to back it up. It should almost be called the backup bit. Please back up this file because I have changed something in this file. It has been saved. It is different now. And so this backup process will go through that. Obviously, if it's a full backup, this bit doesn't matter at all. But if it's an incremental backup, it becomes so important so that it can go through and find all of the things that have changed and only back up the things that have changed. Why would you want to back up a file that you've already backed up previously and it hasn't changed? This is the beauty of an incremental backup. You've got also the same issue with a differential. Differential backup also looks for this bit, although it's based on a certain time frame. And in my videos, I break out the differences between incremental and differential and really show you the differences between all of those so you can figure out the details. So from a very simple perspective, the bit is set automatically when the file is modified. If you answered D, 32% of you said the attribute is set when a file is modified. You got that one absolutely right. Now, let's go through the ones you also chose, but were not correct. So the first one is a system administrator defines the attribute for all files and folders to restore. Nope, the system administrator doesn't define the attribute at all. The attribute is defined automatically by the operating system when a new version of the file is saved. You as the user don't have to think about it. You as the system administrator don't have to think about it. It's just a bit that is set automatically, and your software takes a look at it later. 32% or 19% of you said any files with the attribute will have a secondary backup. No, not necessarily. I mean, I guess they could if you told your backup software to make a secondary backup of anything with the file set, but that has nothing to do with the bit itself being set. That's you using it in a certain way. What we're really looking for is what best describes the Windows archive attribute. That has nothing to do with the archive attribute. That has to do with maybe some additional backup process that you as a system administrator has decided on. So it would not be E. That has nothing to do with the archive bit inherently. 8% of you said a snapshot is created each time the attribute is set. Thankfully, no. You imagine a snapshot every time somebody saves a file on a system, every time a file is modified, every time there is somebody that, well, look, think of the log file. Think of the event viewer that you go through in Windows. Have you ever seen how many events get put into that event viewer in a second? So imagine having a snapshot every time that file is changed. Nope, thankfully that's not the case. And users set the attribute when they create a new version of the file. Users don't do anything with the attribute. And it's not about new versions of the file. It's about the file being modified at all. We're not talking about file versions or versioning. when we talk about that. That's a very specific world in itself. And the users, of course, aren't setting anything when they do this. The users have no idea that attribute is even there. The only important part is that you as the system administrator know that your backup software is going to use that bit. And you'll, of course, make sure that your backup software is doing exactly that. If you are watching this study group for continuing education unit credit, I will be glad to validate that credit for you. It's not a requirement from CompTIA that it gets validated, but I like to do this so that you can get a digitally signed email from me that says you must have watched this because you followed these specific instructions. If you do not follow these instructions, you don't get the credit. So make sure you listen carefully. What you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link at the top or bottom. You want to click on that. It'll pop open a form that you can fill out. On that form, you want to put your name. You want to put your email address. That's important because I will be emailing this to you. And somewhere in there is a box that you can put information in. You can also put a subject line, and you can put this is the Security Plus study group. You can put that it's February of 2019. That helps me a bit as well. And of course, you can somewhere in that box, in that message to me, all of these are coming to me. So you can put anything you would like in there. If you want me to read it, this is be a good place to do it. But somewhere in there, I want you to put the words archive bit. The archive bit is what we are looking for. So somewhere in that, make sure you put that particular word. Try to make it obvious for me. Some of you like to write a sentence or a paragraph of information and you hide the word in there somewhere. Thanks, but it makes it more difficult for me to be able to find it and be able to validate it and be able to email you back. The actual validation part takes about a second. I have a macro on my system that says, oh, this is February, it's Security Plus, there's the word, and I click a button and suddenly it spins the whole email together and I can look at it and then just send it off to you. But when you hide the words, it makes it harder for me to actually figure out if this is legitimate or not, and I don't want to accidentally delete your email thinking that it was something else. So make sure you make it very obvious that it's archive bit for those of you that missed the word. That's what it is. So I'm more than happy to do that. Usually takes me about a week to turn these things around, so please be patient with me. Thank you so much. So you can figure that piece out. We got time for another one. I know I talked a lot on this one, but I want to get through at least one more piece of information here, one more question that we can go through to have this. So here's our question. Hopefully we can get through this. The question asks, a developer has modified their source code to make it very difficult for anyone else to read and understand. Which of these would best describe this code? Would it be collision, obfuscation, encryption, salted, or hashed? One of those. So a developer has modified their source code to make it very difficult for anyone else to read and understand. Which of these would best describe this code? Would it be collision, obfuscation, encryption, salted, or hashed? Which one of these do you think it'd be? If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA. professormesser.com/QA and answer the question. Obviously, if you're watching on the replay, you'll notice there's nothing happening when you go over to professormesser.com/QA. Sorry about that. You do have to be here live to be able to answer that question online. Make sure you're able to do it. We'd love to have you. I'll tell you in a moment how you can, of course, join us live to be able to do exactly that. I did mention earlier about continuing education unit credits. You can earn those credits by actually watching live. You can also earn those if you're watching on the replay. So either way is fine. I will accept those either way because you had to go through this and get to that either way of those. So let's see how we did. A number of you have already answered that this developer modifying their source code. I have source code on my server that the developer has intentionally modified to make it difficult for anyone to read and understand. And it's part of their security process that they use to hopefully avoid somebody else from copying their code. How did we do? 66% of you said obfuscation. 20% of you said encryption. And after that, it all goes down to single digits. For example, salted is 7%, hashed is 7%, collision is 0%. Really, I think there's one person did say collision, but when this is all rounded numbers. So it's so low, it's 0% for that. 67%, though, said obfuscation. An odd word, obfuscation. Is it really that? Is that what people do when they modify source code, make it difficult to read? That's exactly what that is. It is absolutely obfuscation. This is a very common term, by the way, in when you deal with IT security and where people are trying to hide things in plain sight. Obviously, this is something, it's not encryption. People are not, they're not taking the information and completely encrypting it so that no one would ever be able to read it without the proper key. The information is right there, but they've now changed the source code to make it so difficult to read that it almost might as well be encrypted, even though it isn't. It is so difficult to read through that it's not something that you as a human being can be able to follow logically on the screen. I have some examples of this in my video that is under the SY501 section 6.1. It's the steganography video where I think I show some obfuscated code to give an example. And if you go out and look at obfuscated software, there's a lot of options out there. This doesn't really change the code. Functionally, the code works exactly the same as it did without having the obfuscation there. But you're taking words that maybe you're taking variable names like username input. You're changing that variable name to G. Well, that has nothing to do. How am I supposed to follow now the terms that are used in here if they're changing all of these terms around? So nothing changed with the logic. The only thing that changed is how we as humans can view that logic. So it's exactly the same. Steganography is a type of obfuscation where you're hiding information inside of an image. So that's a very common way to obfuscate data. It's there in plain sight, but it's hidden in that image somewhere. And unless you know how to pull that out of the image, you're not going to be able to do it. So that's the real important part of this. So for those of you that are worried, this is another definition question. People are saying, what's the key word? It's not really a keyword question. This one was really talking about a very specific use case where someone is taking source code and making it difficult for anyone else to read and understand. That was a very straightforward question and being able to work through these. So hopefully, for those of you that have never run into the word before, it's kind of a funny word to say and a kind of funny word to read. People have sent me notes before and saying, you said this wrong. No, that's the actual word, obfuscation. It is an obfuscated word in itself, isn't it? But it is absolutely in your exam objectives. And if you don't, I've mentioned these exam objectives over and over and over in the study group. These are so important. People ask me all the time, what do I really need to know to be able to go in and take this exam? What topics are really the most important? They list them out for you. CompTIA has really done you a big favor and listed out for you every single topic you need to know when you walk into that door. Nobody else really does this. Microsoft doesn't do this. Cisco doesn't do this. VMware doesn't do this. Other certifying organizations don't do this. CompTIA is very unique, and you should absolutely take advantage of this. Use this as a checklist. Be able to check off everything that's here. If you're not sure about something, you can circle it. You can digitally make it a different color so that you can come back to this and really understand what's there. So make sure you're feeling those pieces out and being able to work through them. You can find these objectives by going to the Google machine, typing in CompTIA exam objectives, take you right to them. You can also go to professormesser.com/objectives. I'll redirect you over to the CompTIA site so you get the latest version of these exam objectives. If you're getting these exam objectives from any other source other than the CompTIA site, they could possibly be out of date. So make sure you get the latest version from the CompTIA exam objectives list on the CompTIA site. We do one of these study groups every month. This one here, February 20th. So the next study group that we do for Security Plus will be March 20th. But between now and then, I have 2 A+ study groups. There's a Network Plus study group. There will be another Security Plus study group after that. If this is well after March 20th, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you can, of course, see when the next live event is going to be. We'd love to have you here. So much fun when you are. Have everybody taking these questions and asking these things. And there's even questions that have come in after these questions. We're going to back up and have a look at some of those in the after show. So even though the first hour of this is over, we've still got plenty of things to talk about. I open up the phone lines in the second hour. We're going to take questions from the chat room. If there was ever a time you wanted to ask me anything almost anything, this would be the time to do it. So stick around if you'd like to do that. We, of course, have my Security Plus course notes. You can find those at professormesser.com/securitycn. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. It really does help. I have a meeting with YouTube next week that they sent me an email and said, can we talk for a little bit? That would not happen unless you supported this site. So thank you so much for that support and for your subscriptions over on YouTube. We also have Twitter out there. So go to professormesser.com/Twitter and maybe even Facebook too. Just type in professormesser.com/Instagram/Facebook/ whatever it happens to be. See if I'm there. There's a few things out there I haven't really publicly promoted that you could find if you put a slash there. There aren't that many things. There's at least one or two, but they're out there and you can find them just by typing in professormesser.com to see if I'm on that particular social media. I like to talk to folks that are online. They somehow seem surprised. I don't know why. I'm more than happy to talk to all those. Thank you for being here on this study group. Thank you for your answers. Thank you for your questions. We're going to talk a lot more in the next hour. Stick around. But thanks for joining us on this first hour. We will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Yeah, let's not fuzz the website. Let's not just throw garbage at it. It's not hidden. Like if there's, for instance, I put up I put a sample Discord up to try to do some things. I'm building out a bot, and I still check in on it. So if you wanted to find my hardly used Discord, you would go to professormesser.com/Discord. So that's what I mean by that. There's nothing secret out there that you're going to find that nobody else has access to. That would not work out so well. Let's get phone lines open, and then we'll talk a little about these questions that came in. There's at least two of them. For instance, that last one about obfuscation, people are saying, well, doesn't encryption, isn't that obfuscation? It is not. I'll explain why in just a moment. Yes, the formal questions are over. Now it's the questions from you. Instead of me asking you questions, we're turning it around, and you're now asking questions of me. So this is the part where we just reverse this last hour and do these things. Let me bring up my calls so we can have my studio set up to receive your calls. I'll get this going in just a moment. There's nobody else here but me, so it takes me a while to rewind all of these things and get this going for you. So be patient with me as I do this. Well, I like when we'll talk about this in just a moment and why obfuscation is important and why people are now calling me out in the chat room. Corey's calling me out. So Corey, we'll talk. We're not doing that. There's nothing contentious here at all. We're way past that point. I'm on the internet. Nothing bothers me, sir. Let's call in very quickly. Corey's fine. Corey's a good guy, I think. I've never met Corey, but if you think about it, how bad can it be? We're going to type in some numbers here on my screen, and it's going to tell me. Your 6-digit PIN number. Well, I'm going to do that right now. Some of you are already calling in. Stay on the line. Stay right there. I have to get here.
Welcome.
There we go. So I'm in there now. If you're online, you're in there too. I need to bring my mixer. I'm having to reach way over. Let me pull my mixer closer to me. Should have done that earlier. That's show prep. Missed that one in the show prep. Don't worry. And let me tell you right now how you can call in. If you are in the continental United States, it's a toll-free number. I pay for the call. It's 855-785-RJ45. That number again, east of the Rockies and west of the Rockies, 855-785-7545. If you're anywhere else outside the continental United States, or you just like Skype, you can call in for free because Skype doesn't require any Skype minutes to call a toll-free number. So I also pay for that on Skype. I pay twice. I pay for Skype and I pay for the toll-free. But you're more than welcome to do that by putting a +1 at the beginning. Put a +1 855-785-7545, and that will also put you in the queue to talk as well. So quickly, let's go back very quickly and go through some of these questions that people were asking earlier. Let's first talk about obfuscation versus encryption. There's a big difference there. Encryption is taking information that you can easily read, for example, or something that is a plain text, and you are making it so that you could not possibly read that. A computer can't possibly understand it. If it's source code, a computer could not possibly run that source code unless you had the decryption key. And only then would you be able to convert that back into a form that would be readable by a human or readable by your computer. Obfuscation is not encrypting any of the data. Obfuscation is simply taking something that a human would be able to read just fine and making it so complicated to read that it's impossible for you to follow, that the human brain cannot figure it out. So that's the differences between those two. It's still there. All of the logic is there. And if you were a computer, you would be able to read the source code just fine, but you're not a computer. And that's why when we write code, as Corey knows, when you're developing code, you try to put variables in that make sense. So if somebody's putting in their first name, you might have a variable called input first name or first name. Something where you're looking at that and goes, oh, that's the first name. It's obvious. But if you change that variable to B, well, now you're reading through the code. B is now, we're telling this, somebody's putting something in and it's B. I wonder what that is. We may have to go dig deeper into the code just to understand what we're looking at when we see the code referencing B. Okay, well, that's first name. Okay, well, there's only 700 variables in this program, and they're named B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I can't keep up with that. That is a very, very simple form of obfuscation, the very simplest obfuscation. But it's something that is very commonly done. There is a type of obfuscation that is done intentionally on web servers to make it easier to send this traffic across. For instance, web servers very commonly take, on web pages, we use JavaScript a lot. And JavaScript is a very well written out program. There's something called JavaScript where we can take this JavaScript and we can obfuscate it. We can crunch it down and minify it. It's called. It minifies the code. It gets rid of all the blank lines. It gets rid of all the spaces between everything. It might even change some of the variables around to make them shorter so that we're not transmitting much. And it minifies it. It effectively is obfuscating it and sends it across the network because it's now packaged in this tiny little package. And we have all this JavaScript. You've now not only saved the amount of bandwidth that you're using, but it's going by much faster. So there's a lot of interesting ways to use obfuscation that is an efficiency method and not necessarily something associated with security. That's very common to do. So hopefully, Corey, that's put things in perspective. And if you're not obfuscating your code, that's fine. Most developers don't obfuscate their code. But if somebody is selling their code, there are some very common, well-known obfuscation libraries where people will take their code, put it into that library, and then I have to have that library running on my server to be able to use that code. So that's just another way people try to keep their code safe. It's a challenge out there with intellectual property. So that's where that's come from. That's why we focused on that. There's another question that came earlier on about after A+ and Network Plus and Security Plus, where do you go? And that evolved even into, if you have Network Plus, do you take Network Plus or do you take CCENT? How do you decide between those? We'll talk about those in just a moment. The calls, though, are filling up. They're already filled up the queue. So if you're calling in, I'm sorry. We'll get through some of these calls and clear some things out. So let's first go to 757. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
How you doing, Professor Messer? My name is Jeff. I'm calling from Virginia Beach.
Hey, Jeff. Welcome. What can we do for you?
Well, hey, first of all, I just wanted to say I called you last month about my struggle with A+.
Yes.
And I went ahead and passed both of those exams.
Nice,
and
congratulations.
I appreciate your advice on that. And my other question is, I'm in Network Plus now, and I'm having trouble with the...
Turn that audio down. I can hear that audio echoing there.
Yeah, I turned mine down.
There
too.
You go.
My other question is about, I'm looking for some good, easy study material for IP addressing and subnetting.
Oh,
because,
yes.
I'm struggling a little bit with it right now.
This is a common struggle. It is one that even my son, who is in a class where they're doing Cisco routers and switches and putting it into packet tracer and trying to do this. And he says, what in the world is this crazy nonsense with IP subnetting? And he gets it. It's like a weird language that you suddenly have to figure out. And there's no one way that works for everybody. What I try to explain to people, though, is once you find the system that works for you, suddenly it starts clicking for folks. There was one methodology, I'll give you a couple that you can Google out later. One methodology that is learn IP subnetting by looking at pieces of pie. And it's not actual pie. They're just taking a circle and they're cutting up the subnets as a circle. And suddenly when people see it visually like that, it can click for you and go, oh, that's what we're doing when we're doing all this IP subnetting. Some people use the magic number system for IP subnetting. I have my biggest problem when I'm in a test, I mentioned this earlier, is anxiety. I'm nervous. I'm trying to get through this test. And it's difficult for me to calculate anything dealing mathematical. I can barely read English at that point. Why would you put math in front of me? And I created a method for IP subnetting for me where I did not have to even do any calculations. The worst calculation you have to do is add one or subtract one. And so I created a video for 7-second subnetting because that's how quick I can do it. I can subnet in just a few seconds by looking at these tables that I write out prior to doing that. And each one of those has absolutely valid ways to do subnetting. With some people, certain formats or certain methods work better than others. Some people do the magic number format, like that's exactly what I need. I got it. Magic number is all I need. Some people say, I'm like you. I prefer doing the 7-second subnetting. I've had people, of course, send me emails and go, what in the world is this ridiculous 7-second subnetting thing? Why would you go through that? And that's somebody I know can do math under pressure. They're not like me. So you have to find the one that works for you to be able to figure out those pieces. In my videos, I also do it the long way too. I convert everything from decimal to binary. I do the binary calculations and then I convert it back to decimal just so you can see what's going on behind the scenes. That obviously is not the process you should be using on an exam. On your Network Plus exam, you have very limited time. And once you go past Network Plus, if you were to go past Network Plus into some of the Cisco exams, you need to be able to subnet in just a few seconds. And you don't have that level of time to deal with. The subnetting part is just secondary at that point. You're trying to solve a much bigger routing problem or a much bigger issue with your configurations. So that's why I tell people try a lot of different methods. And I tell them that in my video. I tell them that sometimes it's a combination of them, but there will be a moment where you're going to be working with this and all of a sudden a light bulb will go on, or you'll audibly hear a clicking noise and you'll realize, oh, that's what's happening. The other thing that will also help you, and this doesn't help you now, but as you start working and doing anything with networking, you will start to find that you become more familiar with how these things work. One of the first networks I worked on was a /26 network. So that's not one of those 8-bit boundaries, but I now have a /26. I got it. It's in my head. I've now memorized it. So don't worry so much that it seems like it's difficult or it's taking a long time. It takes a little bit of practice, but I promise you, and this happens with every single person who does subnetting, I promise you eventually it'll go click and you go, okay, I'm starting to get the hang of this now. Okay, now I see what we're doing. It's laid out and I can go with this. So that's my advice to you, Jeff, is to try a lot of different things, find the one that works for you, and I promise you it's going to make a lot more sense.
All right. I appreciate that very much. Also, I bought your Network Plus notes. They are awesome.
You're awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Take care, sir.
Best of luck. Thank you. That's really the biggest challenge with subnetting. And I still have to talk to my son and say, no, just stay with it. It will click for you. I promise. One of the things I saw after I learned subnetting, I went back and because I learned subnetting when IP started to become popular in the enterprise. So I was right there at the beginning. So we were all struggling through it together. And then afterwards, I found the one that talks about pie pieces, like a circle, and subnetting out as making a circle and cutting up pie pieces there. And that really resonated with me. If I'd seen that earlier, it would have made a lot more sense to me, which is why I mentioned it. Let's go South Florida, 561 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor Messer. This is Ed calling from Miami Lake.
It is, Ed. Welcome. What can we do for you today?
Thank you. Well, first, I was curious if you had a chance to watch Pine Gap yet.
Oh, I haven't. It's on my list. If I could tell you everything that has happened in my world in the last few weeks, you would understand, but I have not. But I specifically wrote it down. It's on the list. It's in whatever list of things you have in your wish list. And I haven't, but it is on my list. So thank you for the reminder.
Okay, well, anyways, the reason I was calling is because there was an article recently about Australia's Parliament network has been hacked.
Oh, yeah, I think I saw that.
Yeah, and their national cybersecurity advisor had wrote something about that. And anyways, anybody involved in network or cybersecurity will be involved in incident response at some point.
No doubt.
Correct? And so what they were saying that was that the government had not learned of the identity of the hacker before it acted to block the activity, and that this defensive action, he said, also does other unpleasant things like remove some of the forensic evidence that they're interested in. So it seems to be like a fine dance between the containment and protecting the forensic evidence.
Yeah, it gets even worse when you're talking about the matters of state. When you're dealing with federal governments, state governments, it becomes much more complicated because what's at stake is a lot more than just financial information or someone's email address has gotten out. In those particular situations, there's actually people's security at stake, not IT security, their security to be someone living in a particular place. And that's why you have these environments where people are having to make those very tough decisions, like the one you just mentioned, where do you cut off the bad guys from what they're doing, or do you try to contain them and then somehow be able to watch what they're doing to gather more intel, more information about what they're doing? It's really sort of a plus or minus in both of those situations. There's advantages and disadvantages to doing both. In almost every circumstance, cutting off what's going on makes a lot more sense. But the people that have discovered the bad guy are almost never going to be the people that are the security experts. And when I say security experts, I mean people that are well above scope to what I was doing when I was putting together and managing next generation firewalls. We're talking about people that are in the world that they parachute in, and they go to these places where the bad guy has now infested a particular network, and they begin gathering the information at that point. And almost always, they're called after the fact. They are a day late after people have turned off the bad guys, and they're having to reconstruct what went on and with what's left. And the people that turned off the links, they weren't necessarily the security experts to know what they were looking for to begin with. You had to parachute someone in for that. So that's one where you almost understand why they turned off the bad guys, why they disconnected that connection, so there would be no more data that was exfiltrated or information that they happen to get their hands on. Instead, now you're left with sort of putting together the pieces of what's there. Part of the other problem, of course, is... Go ahead, Ed.
So they also mentioned that the hackers had used tools that had not previously been seen. So it seems like it must have been like a zero-day exploit. And if that were the case, wouldn't they have to been using some kind of a heuristics type of identification?
Well, you don't know exactly what they were doing. Part of the problem is that we're reading this in some type of online article that was provided. So there's already 2 or 3 problems with that. One is that you are never going to know the details of what happened with that particular incident. It was some unknown malicious person from outside that was attacking federal assets. You will never know what really happened with that. No one outside of a particular level of that government will ever know what really happened, because that's national security type things. And in fact, it's probably best that we don't. Secondly, it's being reported by someone who's usually very competent in being a technology journalist, but even someone who's a technology journalist doesn't know the intricacies of these types of attacks. Most people in the IT industry don't know the intricacies of these types of attacks. So we also have to be a little bit suspicious of what we're being told through the press and how it's finally being interpreted in a way that we can read. There's a number of quotes in a lot of these articles on that particular incident where they were very specific with the terminology that they were using. And they were definitely not going outside the scope of giving much detail. So when they say that there were tools that were never used before, we aren't really sure what those are. Do they mean the type of tool that was used to take advantage of a vulnerability? Was the exploit something new? Was it a vulnerability we didn't know about previously? Or was the process of getting into the network and exfiltrating that data something that was not done previously? So those, we just don't know, and they're not going to tell us. Probably for the best that they don't. But it could have been either one, or it could have been both. What a lot of these folks do when after this is all over with, they go in and look at the tools that were used. In some cases, it's a script or there's source code they can go to where there's very specific patterns or fingerprints to the type of source code they're using, and they can look and understand, we really believe this one was written by these folks in a particular country. And so they can at least point back and say, oh, we really think it was those folks that did it. But of course, this is spies and intrigue. Is it really that country that wrote that code, or was it another country writing the code to look like the other country? Well, now we've gone down that particular rabbit hole, and we could talk all day about what is real and what isn't in that world, Ed.
Yeah, were you talking about planting a false flag then at that point? But what I've found about cyber, what I've kind of figured out then is cybersecurity basically boils down to two things: it's intelligence and counterintelligence.
Well, it's at its very highest level, I guess you could put in those two categories, and that's why you have a lot of the focus of what they're calling cybersecurity these days, focusing on two sides. There's certainly more facets to it than this, but the two sides most people focus on is the attackers and the people that are being attacked, and trying to understand what's going on and optimize both sides of that in an effort to be able to be more secure overall. That's where when people talk today about cybersecurity, which isn't a word, it's not a thing. We don't have we're protecting our cybers. It's sort of a word that marketing made up that we've now gathered and we use as describing what this IT security world is. That's what the two sides people are usually talking about. They're talking about either the ones that are attacking and being better at doing the penetration testing and the attacking side of it, or being better at the defense. It's offense and defense. We're playing football, and it's all about IT security.
Right. Okay, well, I always appreciate your insight, Professor Messer, and have a great day.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate the call. This is a constantly moving environment. And when I was working for a third party that was doing this next generation firewall, I got to see it live, play out in real time every day, sometimes multiple times a day. And it's different levels and different things that are happening. So one can never really know exactly what's going on, especially at that federal level. And as I mentioned, probably for the best. The 514 area code, you've been holding for so long. Thank you, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Sai. I'm calling from Montreal, Canada.
Oh, hello. The Canadians checking in. Thank you, sir. I will certainly let Mrs. Professor Messer know, who's 100% Canadian, and I will let her know you called in. That's important. What can we do for you?
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much for all your videos on YouTube. I'm preparing for Security Plus right now, and I'm reading a book, and whenever I have a doubt, I always jump onto your YouTube channel. It's really informative.
Well, thank you. I appreciate
so much for that. Secondly, this is something that I have been battling in my head for so long. I've been a network security engineer for about 5.5, 6 years now.
Okay.
I have been the same from the beginning of my career, and I had this thought of getting into security like 3 months ago, and I decided that Security Plus would be the right way to go. And right now, I'm not working. I'm completely focused on Security Plus, and I want to give the certification and move in to security completely. Would this be the right approach? And what would be the next steps if I want to get into the defensive cybersecurity, if that's the term that I can use?
I think that's perfectly reasonable. You have some advantages here, is that you have some background and some experience that you can rely on. So that in itself is very, very valuable. I'm unfamiliar with what in your particular geography, what employers are looking for. And this varies even inside of the United States with different areas as well. For example, for the Department of Defense, for the United States federal government, Department of Defense loves to have people that are Security Plus certified. But if you go to other organizations that may be private companies, private corporations, some corporations like Security Plus, some people aren't at all interested that you have Security Plus. It really depends on who's hiring you. And I would imagine it's a very similar issue wherever you happen to be in all of North America. So in Canada, I'm sure there are certain areas where some of these certifications are well established. People want those certificates. They're looking for people to hire with those certifications. Some employers intentionally don't want you to have these certifications so they can hire you less expensively and then train you as you go. So maybe by the time you leave that particular employer, you've earned some of those certifications. It's a different philosophy depending on where you go. So my recommendation for you, and really for anybody who's trying to get into to figure out, what do I do next? Should I take certification X, Y, or Z? I always tell people, what are employers asking for? Because often we're doing this to get a job or to get a better job. So if that's your goal, find out what they're asking for. And you can do this pretty easily from your chair by going to some of the larger employment sites in your area, seeing what jobs are available in cybersecurity, since that's the term we're all using these days. That's an easy one to search for penetration testing, for IT security, for firewall management. Start looking for some of these keywords, see what they're looking for. Are they looking for CISSP level, which would be sort of a higher level certification? Are they looking for Security Plus? Are no certifications mentioned at all? And this might be a good thing to start keeping a spreadsheet on. Go to Company A, Company B, Company C, figure out what their requirements are so that you can go back later and start piecing together, in my particular area, what are people really looking for? You may find that most people in your area are looking for the Cisco CCNA Security, which is a type of certification from Cisco.
Right.
And you may find there's not a lot of people looking for Security Plus. Or you might find the opposite, is that there's a huge number of people looking for Security Plus and not so many people looking for some of the higher level certifications. That's really going to be the most important thing for you. Now, that's to get a job or get a better job. I also tell people you're probably going through the certification process to be a more knowledgeable technical person. And you will be. You could go through the entire set of certifications for A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, never take the exam, but still have a set of knowledge that you now understand that gives you an advantage over others that may be in your particular line of work. So those are important things as well. But obviously, if you're looking for a job, it's what the employers want, not so much what you want. Just keep that in mind as you're doing your job search.
That helps. That definitely helps. And one last question after this.
Sure.
If I'm going into Security Plus, once I complete the book, is there a good resource online where I could just go, give some mock tests to familiarize myself with the kind of questions that are going to come into the examination and stuff like that?
That is a very useful thing to have. You probably heard me say before that when you're studying for an exam, you need a good book, you need some good videos, you need some good Q&A, and you need plenty of hands-on. That Q&A part is for me anyway, I find that sometimes the most useful part because it validates everything that you've learned in your book and learned in the videos and sees if you really understood the things that you were trying to get solid with those exam objectives.
Right.
There is a mixture of different things out on the market. I've seen people talk about some sample exams out on Udemy that are very good. I've seen people talk about some that are online that are okay, or some people get better ratings than others. The place I would recommend that you go currently is probably the CompTIA subreddit on reddit.com. So it's reddit.com/r/CompTIA. There's a lot of people there that talk about that they took their Security Plus exam. These were the resources that they used, and they found that these particular resources worked best for the type of questions that were on the exam. So that's what I would recommend you do, is go see what they said about this, because some people are very good at leaving a list of resources and what worked best for them. And they nicely are able to do that without violating their candidate agreement. So they're not giving away anything. They're not telling you what was on the exam, but they're telling you, if you want to find something that really, really helps, these questions helped me the most. And that may be a good place to start finding the best resources for you.
That's great. I'm actually on the Reddit, and I'm looking at one of the subreddits. So
perfect.
Yes, this is helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And I'll join back on the next study group.
We look forward to seeing you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Professor.
I'll give that there. Somebody in the chat room. Yes, that was the link to Reddit, reddit.com/r/CompTIA. That was it. Plenty of great stuff there. One more from the calls, and then I'm going to go back to some of those questions we talked about earlier, and we'll break some of those down. Let's go to 540. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Hey, thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Yes, so my name is Herman Akar, and me and you, we spoke in December.
Okay.
Yes.
What did we talk about, Herman?
We talked about the certification security class that I was taking, and I was scoring 730, and he gave me some advice. I don't know if you remember.
That's in my world. I don't quite remember it off the top of my head, but please continue. Let me know how did we do? Did I give you good advice or bad advice?
Yes. After you gave me the advice, I want to take the exam, and I passed the exam.
Oh, excellent.
I just want to say for your advices. Thank you so much. And also, now I have the Security Plus, and I'm doing cyber security and network security in community college.
Great.
And I'm applying for a job right now, but I don't have any experience. What kind of advice can you give me to do my resume so that I can be in a job market? Is that the problem for me right now?
It's sort of a problem for anybody who's in your position, and there's a lot of people in your position that have gone through classes, you've gotten certifications, you've gotten all of the things that you really do need to show an employer that you are working on and getting towards this. But of course, some employers, and people will say this online all the time, no, experience is the most important thing, which may not actually necessarily be true, but experience is certainly important. And it's one that employers like it when you have experience for the most part, unless they're trying to hire people with no experience at a better price, which also happens. But some people, if you've not had a job in security, how are you supposed to get into the world of security? So let's talk very specifically about security, because you did talk about networking, and I've said this over and over again, is that in IT security, where people are trying to protect data, they're installing firewalls, they're configuring multiple forms of authentication. They're putting together authentication methods with LDAP and with Kerberos. They're building out VPN connections for remote access. They're building out VPN connections to partners of the organization. They're doing the things that the day-to-day IT security professional does. Those people are have these core set of knowledge that they work with, and they almost always got into those roles by starting in networking. And that's because all of those things I just discussed, which was installing and implementing these new firewalls, Putting the firewall rules we did today certainly have a strong networking foundation. Being able to integrate VPN connectivity, which has a huge routing and IP address associated with it. Being able to do remote access and being able to set up IP pools and have the remote access work properly because you're connected on the outside line of the internet and create those rules. A huge networking foundation. And I don't think it's mentioned enough that people who are in IT security are also very, very knowledgeable of IT networking. The more you know about networking, the easier your security job is going to be. So the first thing I would say is if anybody is interested in getting into security, learn as much as you can about the network. Learn as much as you can about switching. Learn as much as you can about routing, about dynamic routing protocols, about IP subnetting, about anything that deals with networking in general. And it will help you when you get into security. One of the other things I recommend you do, I'll give you these two other tips for walking in with no experience into a job interview. One is that you need to become very active with your local user groups. So if you are in the Cisco user group, if you go to a Palo Alto Networks user group, if you go to a Checkpoint user group, anything related to security or to cloud computing or to technology in general, make sure you bring that up in the interview. Make sure people see that. Very often it's at a list of things that are at the end of a second page of a resume, or it's at the bottom. Employers aren't very good about reading resumes. So as you're talking to the employer, make sure you mention of a set of technology that you saw at the latest Cisco user group meeting so that they understand you're active with these types of user groups and that you are interested in the technology outside of the scope of school and outside of the scope of a job. The other thing I'll mention is that when you go to these user group meetings, you need to meet these people. You're not just going to the user group meeting to say you were there. You want to be sure that you get contacts there. That is extremely important. I've talked in other user groups about how important those contacts are. Make sure that's a good reason for going to those user groups. And lastly, set up your own technology at home with security. So if you've never set up a firewall before, go out to the internet, find pfSense, find maybe even a version that's already virtualized that you could bring up in a virtual machine. You don't even have to install Linux from scratch or even compile the code from scratch. All you have to do is install the virtual machine and get it running. pfSense is a great firewall for learning the basics of firewalls. It's the firewall front end that I show in my videos because all I did was download the virtual machine, bring it up, hit it with a web browser, and now I'm managing a firewall. That's pretty good stuff. That version of pfSense also had integrated into it a version of Snort. So not only was I creating and looking at firewall rules, I was also going through and creating and looking at intrusion prevention rules. And all of these things are now in, you set it up in your lab, maybe even run traffic through it, maybe even run your internet connection through it to see how it reacts, to see what logs are created, to see if anything's blocked, to try blocking certain types of traffic. Begin experimenting with what's going through that firewall. Those are stories that you can tell an employer when you walk in. They'll say, well, you don't have any experience. Oh, I don't have any practical experience from an employer, but here's what I'm running at home. I'm running pfSense. I've set up IPS. We ran these things. Oh, you'll never believe what I saw hitting my network last week. And trust me, as soon as you put a firewall that is logging information on your internet connection, you will capture information immediately that you'll be able to use in a story. So you want stories to be able to do that. And there's some great stories that you can create just by putting these things in a lab and getting those running. Hopefully that those types of things will help for you too. Because you got your hands full, sure. Herman.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your advice. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yes, it's been like 3 to 4 interviews that I was doing, and they were going over my resume, and they've been asking the question, hey, obviously, I'm very blind. I don't know what to say because I don't have any experience. I don't know what to say, but hopefully somebody will have mercy of me and I'll get my first job and I can go from there.
Load up the pfSense, load up the Snort, start gathering information, get some stories together. Get 2 or 3 good stories from that, and you'll have something to tell a prospective employer, and they'll be more interested in finding out more about what you know.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Thanks, Herman. I appreciate the call. That's one of the things that when you're trying to figure out what do I say in these situations where somebody will tell you, well, you don't have any experience. Like, I don't, but you need to have that story there. Trust me, they already have stories inside of their organization where they've been doing those things as well. So you need to have stories that you can build up from the things that you're doing in your lab. pfSense and Snort are 2 very good places to start. If there are other things, if there's a commercial product that they have downloads of a commercial product that you can install into a VM, what a great opportunity to load that up and try it. That becomes useful as well. So let's very quickly, let me talk about some of the questions that we got earlier on in the study group. So people were asking about, you've done A+, you've done Network+, you've done Security+. Now where do you go from there? What is the next thing you do? And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of what determines what you do next is based on your specific goals and objectives. And everybody's got a different set of those. So I can't tell people, well, here's the answer, because there isn't one. I don't have the answer. I have a number of answers. I gave a few of those earlier about going to study groups and building out your own at-home content. And from a perspective of what security certification you go to next, it's going to depend on what you want to do. So a lot of people, if they're into being more of the red team, they're on the blue team. It depends on what you want to do. You may want to go to different courses to help you understand about how to build next generation firewalls and protect from bad guys coming in. Or you want to take a class that is more about how do you attack these systems? How do you find the vulnerabilities in those systems? And it may be that you're going to a class from something like SANS, SANS. SANS has a great series of classes. They are well established in the security industry, and they're great training courses, but they're not necessarily certifications. From a certification perspective, a lot of people have seen things like the Certified Ethical Hacker, and although I've said previously I don't personally support that particular certification, a lot of employers do. So you have to make a value judgment there as to whether that's something that makes sense for what you're trying to do. The gold standard in security is the CISSP. If you're looking long-term in security, that will probably be a certification you work towards, but that certification requires that you have a certain number of years of experience as a prerequisite, as one of their prerequisites. So that's not something you can jump into either. And as I mentioned also earlier, and please temper this, many people don't start in security. It's very difficult to get an entry-level position in security. Many organizations don't have an entry-level position in security. They're often hiring people from the network side. So that goes back to that information I provided earlier that said, if you want to be really good in security, you need to be really good in networking. And the security people already know this. So they're going to hire people that are really good in networking before they would hire somebody entry level who has no networking experience. So that's why I mentioned those and having those things there. That's my recommendation. So if you've done A+, Network+, and Security+, that's up to you. Do you do an industry certification? Do you do certification from a company? Maybe you go get a Palo Alto Network certification or a Checkpoint certification. Maybe you go get Cisco certifications. Maybe you focus more on the networking side. It also depends on what you want to do. Maybe you want to be a system administrator on Windows or Linux. Well, there's your certification path. Maybe you want to do database management. There's your certification path. So it's very broad decisions you need to make about what you want to do with your life. What do you want to be when you grow up? Make that decision, and then you can build out the pathway to go where you want it to go. And very often, that path will take some jogs you weren't expecting, but as long as you stay on the path, you will make it there, I promise you. Mine started in a hardware break fix. It started with delivering printer cables, literally delivering a printer cable. I was a delivery person, a very glorified delivery person that would also do memory upgrades and hard drive installations, swap out equipment on warranty repairs. You know, that field tech. I was a field tech. That was my first job out of college. That from field tech moved into corporate help desk. Corporate help desk moved into desktop administration. Desktop administration moved into server administration. Server administration moved into network administration, which then moved into working as a systems engineer for a manufacturer. And that at that point, I just worked for manufacturers for the rest of my career. So I was never expecting to eventually work as a security engineer for a next generation firewall company. I would have never thought that when I was a field tech. But you just kind of follow the path, and it will take you there eventually. You'll just be amazed what happens to you in the next 10 years. Because there's no way to predict it. And that's to me, that's one of the great things about this industry, is that it will surprise you all the time. And that's one of the great advantages of IT, is that you have options. And those options often will change, and you have even more options. It's a great place to be. That gives you a lot of options for what you want to do, not just now, but well into your career. You don't have to think later on, did I pick a stagnant career? Is IT really going anywhere? Nobody's ever said that, because there's too many options available of things you can do. It's really remarkable and a great thing to do. Another question people asked earlier was about, since we were talking about networking, was about Network Plus, or they said CCNA, I think. They did not say the Cisco ENT, the CCENT, which are really, if you had to compare two certifications, those would be the closest two to compare. So the Cisco's entry-level technician, entry-level networking tech, which is the CCENT, and then obviously the Network Plus. People commonly compare those two things. They are not comparable at all. They are two very different certifications. They are two very different difficulty levels. They are in many cases very different in experience that would be needed to really get through both of those certifications. They are completely different in their expectations of your knowledge. So whenever I talk to people and they're trying to make a decision about Network Plus or CCENT, it goes back to that question again, which is, well, you're asking me, should I buy a car or should I rent a camera? Those are not different. Those are completely different things. Should you buy a car or rent a camera? I don't know. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to take some pictures? Or are you trying to go somewhere? Are you trying to make a movie? Or are you trying to drive for Uber? These are two. I need to know what you're trying to accomplish. So you also need to figure those things out too. Are you trying to get that entry level position into a help desk? Network Plus fits very nicely with that. Are you trying to get entry level into working in a network group? Network Plus works very well with that. Are you eventually moving into switch management? Do you want to manage routers? Do you want to do dynamic routing management? Do you need to understand enterprise networking? Maybe you skip over Network Plus, you go straight to the CCENT and beyond. Those are the decisions that have to be made. And it's a very different path depending on what you're trying to do. Maybe you do both. Maybe you do Network Plus and then move into the CCENT, because as I mentioned, those are two different certs. They're not comparable. The Network Plus is going to give you a nice foundation for doing things with the CCENT, which goes well beyond Network Plus, trust me. But if you skip Network Plus and you go straight to CCENT, you're going to be spending a lot more time learning the fundamentals before you ever get into the routing or the switching aspect of those certifications. So it's not one where I can easily tell you this one is better than the other. There's plenty of videos on the YouTube that will tell you very decisively one of these is better than the other, and they are completely misinforming you. Completely. There's no question, because they are so dramatically different. One would hope that videos that are trying to point you in a particular direction are doing that with the scope being a particular path. And that's completely acceptable, but not everybody has the same path. There is never 100%, this is the direction you should go. Never, never, never. So think about your path first. Never think about all of these certs you want to get. People have come to my site and say, I have this cert and 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 that one and this one and that one and the other one. They got 10 certs. And they say, I need an entry-level position in IT. Like, hold on. You're way past that point. Why do you have 10 certs if you're just trying to get an entry-level position into IT? You've kind of oversaturated yourself here. You've gone way too far outside the scope of what you were trying to do. In fact, I would probably tell the employer you have 3 of these. Do not tell an employer you have these other 7, because they're going to think you'd be overqualified for this job, which is a real thing. Overqualification for somebody who's getting a job is an absolutely real thing. Employers will not want to hire you if you have way too many certifications. They want to fit the right person to the right job. And if you show up showing that you're more than what you are, that could work against you in fitting into this position. It's a conversation that has to take place when you sit down with that employer. What are you guys looking for? What do you need? If you were putting somebody into this position, what's the best description of that person? What would that person know? What would they be able to do? And if you can start the conversation out before anybody's doing a Q&A back and forth, before they start grilling you, it's a good chance to say, before we even start down this road, tell me about what you guys are looking for. What are you doing? Why is this position open? And what are you trying to fill? And it's that, in fact, it probably will take the person aback, because people don't commonly do this. But then they can describe, here's what we're trying to do. And they can put it together. And then you can talk to all of those things. This is a very common process if you've ever been in a sales meeting. If somebody just gets right up in a sales meeting, thank you all for being here, let me show you my slides. That is not how a sales meeting is supposed to go. It's supposed to go, thank you all for being here. What are you guys trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? It's the same process, but it's now in an interview. What are you guys looking for? Because you're trying to sell yourself. It is a sales position. It is a sales role. It's a sales meeting. You're selling yourself and being able to get that make that happen. So make sure you understand how the sales conversation is supposed to go. Because if you start off with, let me tell you about myself, you don't even know if you're a fit. In fact, you might be a fit, but you may be talking about things that have nothing to do with the job they're trying to fill. And you're completely passing each other 2 ships in the night, and you miss the whole thing. So don't fall into that trap either. People in the chat room are asking, what's the time frame for getting the CE reply from Professor Messer? Usually it's about a week. Sometimes it's a little more. I think I'm at about a week right now. I'm about a week behind with these right now. I usually will sit down, I'll churn through them. That usually goes very quickly, but it's just a matter of me sitting in front of this computer and going through and finding them. So if you put it through and the next day you realize, hey, I haven't heard anything yet, let me send them a message and ask where it is. It's been 24 hours. And I'll send you a note saying, dude, I am not, I'm behind. I'm sorry. 24-hour turnaround. That's a tough one for me. I try to do them quickly after the study group. So sometimes you do see them in 24 hours because a lot of them come in, they've just arrived in my inbox this last hour. So I know with that big chunk of them there, I can get a lot done if I do them tomorrow. But that doesn't always happen because the world is happening behind me and things are happening there. Quickly in the chat room, people are asking why I don't recommend the CEH cert. I recommend you knowing the content of the things that are covered with the CEH certification. My problems with the CEH is that it is a certification that I personally would not take because of their previous problems dealing with people's personal information. So if you go out and you search for CEH certification, Snowden, that should find plenty of information on how they handle your personal information or how they've handled your personal information in the past. I know nothing else about the EC Council. I know nobody who works there. I know nothing about their structure. I know nothing about them other than people's private information can't seem to be private there. So me personally, I would never give them my personal information. Never. They would never get a copy of my personal ID or my picture of my passport, which is required by them for you to take these exams. They're never getting it. So ethically, I feel it's not appropriate for me to provide you with training materials to take that exam when I personally would never take that. And again, I'll put the temper that on the top of that with, it's too bad because I really like what they teach in that certification. I think that's good content that's in that certification. I just don't have a good feeling about them. Maybe someday they'll talk to me and they'll say, no, here's what we did and here's where this stuff is, and I'll feel better about it. I don't know what they'd be able to say, quite honestly, for this. So that's the real key for me, is I have to trust every part of that process. And I think it probably is, from a business perspective, I think it probably would make sense for me to do a course. From a personal and ethical perspective, I can't do it. So I'm not going to. So you may feel more comfortable with it. So that's more of a personal decision on my side. If you go through all that, you look through the details, you think, I think they're fine now. I feel more comfortable with them. I've got an opportunity and it really means I have to get the CEH for this opportunity. I completely understand. And you should absolutely do what you think is best. I'm giving you just the reasoning why I don't create a CEH, because people ask me all the time, hey, are you going to do a CEH course? And I have to keep saying, no, probably not. It's very low on the list. And that's why it's just low on the list for all of those things. That's the only reason for that piece is for me deciding what that is there. And there's a lot of things that I go through when I'm deciding on courses. That one is just kind of a deal breaker for me. Another one, Linux Plus. Linux Plus, I started what was going to be a Linux Plus course back 2 versions ago. And I'm kind of counting the brand new one that I don't know if it's really out yet or not, but is about to be. There's a Linux Plus that is being created by CompTIA that is their own internal Linux Plus version. Prior to this, Linux Plus was a version that was licensed from LPI. CompTIA took the LPI materials, they stuck the CompTIA name on it, and they gave you a CompTIA certification. But the content, the exam objectives, and the exam itself was an LPI product. CompTIA has decided we're going to do one ourselves internally, and we'll still be Linux Plus, but the newest version is going to be our own internal version one. So I started a Linux Plus content. I started building out the content just to see how it would be received 2 versions ago. And I was not happy with the reception, so I decided this probably isn't the best fit for me right now. I'm still looking at it. Maybe when the new Linux Plus comes out, I look through this content and I think, okay, now I think this is a better fit, then I'll consider that. And it is up there on the list. It's things I look at. This list, by the way, changes hourly. This is it's constant motion for these. So, and again, I think it's only one exam. So there may be some value in going back and looking at Linux Plus once that gets off the ground there, because I really like Linux. If you're on ProfessorMesser.com right now and you're in my chat room, you're on the Linux machine. So I'm huge into Linux. I love it. I have multiple Linux servers and multiple web servers, database servers, load balancers. The mixer that's sitting right here next to me runs Linux. So I'm all about it. But it's just one of those things where I just did not fit well earlier. Maybe it'll fit well in the future. That would be great. Am I building new courses? I am doing a number of different things. And they deal with a lot of different technologies. It's all about time, though. I'm a single person who is writing content. Right now, I'm updating the A+ content because the A+ is brand new. So all of that will be done shortly. And then there's other things that I'm planning to work on. And at that point, I sort of take a step back and say, what do we do next? What do we do after that? So I have 2 or 3 things down the road. Would it be a CCENT course? I don't know. As you may be aware, I have a CCENT course notes. I actually created a course, and then I created the course notes, but I never actually shot the course. I'm considering shooting that course. That's another one of those things that's on the list that would be good. And I think having the ICND2 would be good as well. I think completing that CCNA routing and switching would be great. But again, it's all about time. It's a physics problem for me. It's time motion study. It's how quickly can I go from brain to keyboard to internet and do that well. So all of these things are on the table. CASP, probably lower down in the list. It's not as popular as those others, but everything is on the table except for CEH. Sorry, EC Council. That's just how it worked out. Everything's on the table and it's in a list. I certainly have more things in this list that I would ever be able to do, which they tell me is the sign of a good entrepreneur, but I think maybe it's the sign of someone who's a little bit crazy. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's exactly what's going on. Are the course notes complete? Yeah. Everything I publish, if I publish something, it's complete. So the only difference is when I'm building out a video course like I'm doing with A+, I put the videos out as they're done. But if you're getting a book from me, if you're getting a Q&A guide from me, if you're getting a sample exam from me, all of that's complete. Yes. I don't ever put something out that's not full and complete. That would be bad. Would I ever consider streaming these study groups on Twitch? Yeah, I want some of those bits. I want some of that action. Actually, I don't want those. Twitch isn't quite the right platform for me. There's not a lot of gamification going on here. I realize there is content on Twitch that is not game related, but I'm not really looking for a platform that you can click to subscribe and there's a money revenue thing created there. And that's sort of the emphasis on Twitch. And I support people. I watch Twitch all the time, and I absolutely have people on Twitch that I support and subscribe to and give money to because I like that with what they're doing. And I appreciate their business model and I want to help them. That's not really my model. I want to give you as much stuff for free without, you notice on my website, there's no donation button. I don't want there to be that. If you want to help support what we're doing, I have products that will help you. I hope they will help you. I built them so that if you want to pay for those products, you're getting something in return. That's the model I like, that I'm most comfortable with. So I'm going with that. So a lot of what we're doing on the live streams is just me on the live stream. You have access to it, that type of thing. I don't want to make this one where that's why I haven't gone down that road of doing a Patreon or doing a subscription, or it just doesn't fit my model. It fits other models quite well, and I will support those content developers always. But for me, I want it to be a little bit different. And so far, it's working out. So we're good. You guys have been awesome. You've been supporting the site. You've been supporting the products we're creating. You like them. We must be doing something okay. So I'm going to keep that process going. And if something goes awry, we'll rethink that in the future. But right now, you guys have been awesome, and we're going to keep doing what we're doing without hiding things or making separate classes of people or any of that. We don't need to do it for what we're doing. I want everybody to have as much of this content as you can take, and we're just putting it all out there without restricting or putting more stuff behind that. Hopefully, we can just keep doing that. I think it works out well. Are any A+ 1001 tips on studying as new study guide materials are currently being created? My course notes are full and complete for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. They are full, complete, done, printed, for sale, and available. The books, however, will not be available. There's books out there. I'm not writing a book, but the authors of books and publishers of books, like textbooks, will not be available until April. So you have at least a month to a month and a half. My marketing manager, Lori, did a spreadsheet of all of these. And let's quickly go through this because that's what you want, is me talking about a spreadsheet for a bit. But I'm going to do it really quick just to give you a feel. She went and documented every single A+ book that will be available for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002 over the next year. And the release, this is 13 different books. The first one is going to be available on April 10th, and they kind of go April 10th, April 16th, a bunch are like 3 or 4 available on April 23rd, April 30th, May 10th, May 11th. Those are the ones that are probably going to be the most popular. So we're talking about April, May, beginning of April, beginning of May. So there's that month-long time frame where that's what's going to be going on. So if you're looking for a textbook that has anything to do with A+, you're going to be waiting until then. So that's how it works from a textbook perspective. I'm making my videos as fast as I can. They will be published as fast as you will see them online. If you're looking for them, subscribe to YouTube, click the bell. You'll know immediately when I upload them. If all my A+ course notes, they were available before the exam was even available. So they're available right now. So that hopefully that will help. Those are the things that you'll just have to wait on. And of course, as the months go by, more and more A+ content will come out. It's a challenging time when this transition happens. And I recognize that, the industry recognizes that, but content, the creation of content and the publishing of these textbooks from these publishers, it's a slow go. It takes time. It's a very long process. And at a minimum, it takes 6 months or more to produce, to create one of these books and get it published. So just be patient with them. They will get the content out, and you'll have some textbooks shortly. Do I get trained by CompTIA for the new tests? No, I do not get trained by CompTIA. I don't have any professional relationship with CompTIA. CompTIA has used a number of my videos in some of their training materials. I know people at CompTIA. I've sent messages to people at CompTIA, but I'm not a CompTIA partner. I don't have a professional association with them. They are not a business partner of mine, and that's intentional. I very specifically want there to be a separation there. I want to be independent as it is associated with CompTIA. Right now on my site, the only courses I have available are primarily CompTIA, although there is that Cisco set of course notes available. And I want to be in a position where I can create content for any certification anywhere without having any third party tell me what's in my best interest. And unfortunately, when you have a business partner, there's things that are in your best interest, whether that is agreed upon or not agreed upon. I don't have to worry about that. There's no contention at all. There's no need to worry that I'm in anybody's pocket, because I am not, and that helps. That helps me. I hope that helps you too. That's my idea or my reasoning behind it. Very quickly, I want to scroll up just a bit. We were talking about a couple of things at the end of the study group, and I want to be sure there was a question that came up, and I want to be sure about hitting that that are there. I might have missed it. I'm trying to remember what all of these were, so bear with me just a moment as I scroll through these. Oh, it was a salary survey. This came up earlier on Reddit on last week, I think it was, because there are numbers. You always see these salary surveys come out, and they will talk about the A+, the Network Plus, the Security Plus, the CEH, the Microsoft, the Cisco, all of these different certifications. But you have to be very careful about these salary surveys, because they will say that people who have a Security Plus are making this much a year. But what they aren't telling you, of course, is they also have a lot of other things that they have earned. They have other certifications they have. They have probably worked up to that level. And in fact, they may not be using their Security Plus anymore, but they still have it. There's all kinds of challenges there. So a good example that somebody's mentioning in the chat room, Matthew saying, I saw a survey for Security Plus that stated it was an average of 100K if you have your Security Plus. That doesn't mean that they're saying if you earn your Security Plus, you will make 100K. They're saying the average of people making 100K happen to have also a Security Plus certification, which are two very different things, by the way. Super different, remarkably different. So a lot of people see these and think, no, I just went out with I got my Security Plus and I went out and they offered me 50. These surveys are wrong. Well, they're not wrong. The surveys are absolutely accurate, but your perception of what they're telling you, I think, may be flawed. So you have to keep that in mind, that these salary surveys are giving you a perspective long-term of the value of these certifications. They're not telling you what you can make today if you happen to go out and get the cert and go want to get a job. If you look at the list from top to bottom and you just put them in order, the top 100, the top 10, the top 50, those are pretty accurate. Those are a pretty accurate breakdown of how valuable those certifications are long-term in your IT career. Don't look at them as anything else, because it's just a mess to do this. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And so you get into those statistical conversations and it just becomes a mess, a convoluted mess. So don't go down that convoluted mess road. Instead, stay high level and just look and see where's CISSP versus Security Plus. I think you'll see a difference. I think you'll see which one is perhaps higher in that list, and probably ostensibly means you will be making more money once you get up to that point. But it doesn't mean that's how much that certification gets you in your paycheck. Those are two different things. So that's where I'd go with this. I'm working through that. One more before we're able to break this thing down. A question: can we get your insight of the future prospects of wireless technologies? I think there's plenty of future in wireless. There you go. I don't know what kind of wireless though. When you say wireless technologies, there are so many different places you can go with that these days. There is obviously the 802.11 networking. There is the 5G, future 5G networks, the mobile wireless networks that we have and we think about. There is now meshed network. We have these huge mesh networks in all of our houses now with the Internet of Things. So there's obviously three different types right there and having that there. So there's a lot that you can work through from a wireless perspective. We're not even close to being done with wireless. Wireless is now more mature. It's now much more secure. Although there's, of course, a lot of conversation going on right now with the 5G technologies and how secure they are going to be in the future. And we can go down a whole rat hole of conspiracy theories about what's going on with 5G and our mobile networks. Obviously, an important thing we all have to watch going forward, since we're all going to rely on those mobile networks more and more and more as we go. So important to consider. And people are bringing up some good points about Security Plus, by the way, in the chat room. When we talked about where Security Plus is in the list, Security Plus might be higher in your list if you're trying to get a job with the United States Department of Defense, where Security Plus is one of the minimum requirements. So that list will change for you. Again, we only look at these lists as broad determinations of what seems to be higher or lower. That's the real challenge there of having the concept of those. Well, that has now taken my voice to another hour and a quarter here. I think we finally hit the line of where I'm able to stay upright and continue talking to you. But I think it was a great after show. Thank you for calling in. Thank you for your questions in the chat room. Thank you for your conversations and your participation in the first hour. We wouldn't be able to do these study groups without you. I say that every time, and every time it's absolutely true. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here. Thank you for your messages you send throughout the month. It often determines what questions you're going to get on the study group. Remember, we've got another study group next month. In fact, because there are 28 days in February, just count the same day in March. And on the 20th of March, we'll be back here with the next Security Plus study group. Before then, we've got A Plus study groups, Network Plus study groups. We'd love to have you there as well. You're welcome to join us at any time by going to professormesser.com/calendar and check in there and find out exactly when the next study group is going to be. We'd love to have you there as well. Thank you for being here. We will see you next time on the Security Plus study group.